Yeah, the Miles Turner thing, Dan, that is of more consequence, I think. That shakes up an East that is already kind of upside down because of injuries and everything, and we didn't expect Milwaukee to kind of be buyers. I don't really think it was maybe talked about. Certainly, if you follow the Bucks like specific Twitter accounts, this stretching and waving Damian Lillard thing, but Miles Turner leaving a team that is already hampered by their own Achilles injury to go to Milwaukee, it does sweeten the pot a little bit for Giannis.
I do think, though, that it is interesting, and how could it not be, Stugotz, to accelerate our hunger at analyzing who can Game of Thrones their way to the top of the crown, that the first two spots that he would go conversationally are Giannis and Miles Turner. And, hey, Dame Lillard, nice seeing you. See you later.
That was supposed to be the piece.
See you later, Damian Lillard. Remember when that was going to run the East, and now it's been traded, or it's been moved around in the roster for Miles Turner, a player who exasperates me, by the way, because
he should be better.
Miles Turner is always on the trade block, and I'm always wondering why he's always on the trade block. And I'm always wondering why he's on the trade block the same way I also used to wonder why is Brook Lopez always on the trade block. And then I see Brook Lopez win a championship when he's used correctly as the seventh guy. Miles Turner, I'm sitting there waiting in the finals for him to prove that I'm right about Miles Turner. And in Games 6 and 7, he proved that I'm wrong about Miles Turner. He ended his Pacers career by not showing up when they needed him to give him something with Halliburton out, and he couldn't give him any rebounds, and he couldn't do anything other than...
He just parlayed it into 113
Other than wander around the court and score 6 points.
At this point, he's a bit of a role player. At $107 million, though, that's not bad. He has some value, and I do find it funny. Yeah, he was perpetually on the trade block, which is why I think he protected himself this time around. He has a trade kicker in his contract. He gets a 15% bonus if he gets moved. He's sick of the trade rumors too.
When you talk about keeping Giannis and the Bucks doing that, obviously it's his decision, but is the pot sweetened with Miles Turner, losing Brook Lopez and adding Miles Turner?
They didn't seem like the reports were that this wasn't a team that was going to be buying.
Right.
And they made a $100 million investment. Miles Turner is a player that can help them. They've made a decision on Damian Lillard. It does seem like they've got some direction, which is, if you're Miami, what is the direction? At least you see all these other teams in the East making moves, and it's very clear that they're going into their offseason with a plan, where other teams are just apparently just treading water
because
again.
The East is wide open. I mean, the Hawks are making moves.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird year to just decide now you're going to tread water again.
You have to think that anything the Bucks do right now, anything, is strategic with the idea this is going to help us re-sign
I don't
Giannis,
want to skip past, though, what we're doing here, which is Dame Lillard is now officially a liability. I understand that he's been injured. I understand that people get awfully forgetful, and athletes will tell you all the time, just stay out of the training room. Even your teammates will forget if you're living in there. That happened fast, man. Damian Lillard was the piece, and now Portland is young and better, good at defense, gets out from under what that would have been if you had it on your contract with an Achilles tear at $50 million a year.
But you look at that whole trade in its entirety, and it's kind of garbage on both sides.
Trade, dude.
It's bad on both sides.
The Heat players had some value, some of the players that were talked about over there. But Damian Lillard, I don't think it's one of those things. Like, you could look at it, certainly what happened in Milwaukee. They just have an in-season tournament win to their name. You could look at it and say, well, Miami avoided disaster there. But I think it's more nuanced than that. There were a lot of things going on in Damian Lillard's personal life at the time. Sure. And he did not want to be in Milwaukee.
He wasn't in shape either. He told Doc Rivers, and then his body broke down from not being in shape.
And he wasn't in shape because of what was going on in his life. And all of a sudden, he shows up in a place that he didn't want to go to. He thought his franchise that he gave everything to would send him to the place that they wanted. And they decided to make an example out of him when he did everything the right way. I don't think it would have gone the same way had Damian Lillard come to Miami. I actually think it would have certainly helped Jimmy Butler, and it certainly would have given Miami what they needed, but the stats speak for themselves.
Well, you can't know, though, whether someone would have gotten injured on your watch or not. I'm more interested in the end of his career, because his value is now past its prime. Whatever that comes back as, even if it can shoot,
it will come back as a bargain.
He'll always be able to shoot, and he's going to have to get accustomed to being a role player. And we've seen in the NBA in this century, Dallas won a championship taking these former superstars and making them role players. And maybe that's going to be the future for Damian Lillard, because when you consider that injury and what was such a big part of his game was how much quicker he was.
Okay, but the thing that you guys are doing, that it's okay. Like, I get it, right? it's all about now. The trade just happened with Miles Turner, and Giannis is interesting. But we're talking about a league superstar who that's the announcement that his career as a star is over.
Yeah.
That announcement of we got to get Miles Turner because the thing we were doing to keep Giannis, that's a spectacular failure, and it's a failure none of us saw coming that has at the end of it. And also, Dame, you're pretty much done. You're not a marquee name in this league. LeBron's still around and Steph's still around. You're not.
We probably would have been there before the Achilles, honestly. He just wasn't considered that. He hadn't flashed it. And I do think that you can tie the injuries to the conditioning and whether or not one franchise would have taken care of his body more, but I don't think it's the end of Damian Lillard's story. I think
I agree with you,
He's
Mike.
one of the five greatest shooters that we've seen all time. I know it's a mental hurdle for him to clear, to have to change his game and maybe become a role player off the bench. It's a spot-up shooter, but that guy can shoot forever.
With the landscape of all these Achilles injuries in the East, Stugotz brought up an interesting point that I wrote down earlier today. I think the Hawks might be the best team in the East right now.
Oh, my God.
That's crazy to say.
It's a scary, crazy thing to say.
Porzingis,
But you get...
No, Dan, the East is so bad. There are so many injuries.
Guys, the Knicks are probably the best team in the East right now.
Right?
And the Cavs, they won 68
No, the
games.
Cavs-
They're cooked.
No,
they're
they're not
frauds.
cooked.
And look, imagine
They're
how
not
bad the
cooked.
Heat are,
Don't do
that they
that
got
to the Cavs.
smoked by
Don't
the
do that
Cavs
to
who were
the
frauds.
Cavs.
But
Don't
I
do
will
that.
bring up this. The Hawks add Porzingis. They add the New Orleans 2026 first-round pick. That's going to be a really good pick next year.
Like it,
They've
though.
got Nikhil Alexander-Walker on a side and trade. They got Luke Kennard, another shooter, on a trade.
You
or
did
on a-
something to Cleveland that's wrong.
What was
that's,
that?
That's not right.
And
Dismiss
Orlando.
them. What's
I think
wrong about
Cleveland-
it?
Orlando's going to be nice with
Cleveland,
Desmond
Orlando.
Bane.
But your point is, look at Atlanta. They were a total afterthought in the conference,
And now they're in it.
battling it out with Miami in that play-in range. And now all of a
Exactly
sudden
right.
they have a path and they're doing something. I have no friggin' clue what Miami is
You
doing.
add all those guys to Trae Young, to Jalen Johnson, who's going to be incredible coming up, to Dyson Daniels, probably second or third in Defensive Player of the Year. Like, Atlanta's building pieces, and if they get that number one pick next year, if the Pelicans are that bad, all of a sudden things are starting to rotate in the way that
even
Atlanta's good.
Chicago
Here come the
made
Hawks.
moves.
Yeah.
Even Chicago, everyone,
keep an eye on 'em.
Everyone, it's not just the top. Everyone around the bottom and middle of the pack is making moves in the East, and the Heat are just standing still. It's
If the
bizarre.
Heat would have lost...
Standing pat, some are saying.
Attaboy.
Hey.
If the Heat would have lost to Atlanta and had the same pick, New Orleans would have called the Heat to make the same trade for Derek Queen, and the Heat would have had a number one pick next year that could be a top 3, top 2 pick.
Mina Kimes is going to join us in a moment, and I'm laughing on the inside at the idea that I keep trying to get you guys to talk to Damian Lillard about Damian Lillard.
We're
and
talking
you'd
Hawks.
rather talk about the Hawks. Like, there's no
team in
conversation
the
that you
East.
would rather have
He's not going to play for a year.
less
Well,
than
let's
the
talk
one
about
about Damian Lillard and what this means. You want to throw this through the frame of Miles Turner when what this means is the announcement from Milwaukee that they're out on the experiment of Giannis and Damian Lillard can ever be anything here as an architectural blueprint.
What's the most aggressive timeline for Damian Lillard to return at his age from that injury? I mean, maybe he has something to say.
26,
He's
26,
done
27.
as a star player. He will be a name, but it'll be a faded name. He'll be able to hit jump shots, but if you take away his quickness, he's no longer Damian Lillard.
Right. I think the conversation that we're having is what does this do to the landscape of the East? And I don't think Damian Lillard has a damn thing to say about the East next year. He's injured.
No.
He's out.
He's 35 years old.
I'm just
in a
pointing
couple of
out
weeks.
how quickly things change. It wasn't but a couple of years ago.
We're just pointing out the Hawks have a shot.
Yeah,
boy.
you guys, that's all you're doing. Mina Kimes is next.